Okay, as you know, my name is Babatunde Jala Epega. I shortened it. That was part of my journey to Baba Jala Epega. I was born here in Lagos, just a stone throw away from here, in actually Lagos Hospital here. And I was expelled from school. I went to Corona Ikoyi at the age of 6. My teacher, who I found to be quite unjust at the time, made us all stand, and I remember this, even though it's like 50, almost 45 years ago. But I remember standing outside Corona School in the heat with all the students in my class because one boy had done something and no one owned up. So I found that quite unjust that all of us had to suffer. So I picked up a stone and I threw that stone at my headmistress's glass and it broke her window. She told my parents, and my parents weren't very happy, of course, but they realized that I wasn't meant to be in school like that here. So the teacher actually asked me to leave, and my parents took me to England. They said, take this child to England. We can't control this child here. He's a wild fellow. So as soon as I got to England, I went to Tunbridge Wells in Kent. I went to school there, and it was the most cold experience I've ever had in my life. I was 6.5 going to 7, and I went to boarding school at that age. And I think that woke me up in life straight away, that even in comfort, you still have steel. And by that I mean that everyone would think, oh, you are lucky, you went to England at 6, 7. But I was very young. I was put in a dormitory with children from England, from Japan, from Saudi Arabia. We were all very young. There was a lot of crying in the dormitory, 12 boys, 6 on each side. And the room was very cold. I remember the cold. But one other thing I got to learn was rugby. And through my life, rugby and learning to deal with my condition and environment has instilled a strength in me. And as we know in Nigeria, you have a lot of things that happen that are out of your control, but you have to find a way to evolve and adapt. And I think from the age of 6, 7, I was very lucky to have that. I went to the oldest school in the world called King's Canterbury, started by St. Augustine in 598 AD. This was the secondary school I went to. And my life seemed pretty, what they say, gold-leafed at the time. Everyone's like, you enjoy, you're in Nigeria, you're in London. I learned to speak Spanish. Unfortunately, I lost my Yoruba, but I'm trying to get that back. I learned to speak Spanish and French. But at the age of 17, my father had a stroke. And he was working too hard, obviously. And sadly, my mom and dad had split up by that time. So my whole life that seemed so rosy stopped because my father's business partners, all of them somehow took the business and it went away. And from that going away, we were left destitute. My dad was in a coma for 3 months, and my mother, who wasn't working, because my sisters and I have 2 lovely older sisters, Yewande and Gigi, we were still in school. So much so that my last year's school fees were not paid. But one of my uncles kindly paid for my school fees, and my mother had to go to work. She started her own business. She too was a journalist, Mrs. Ibiene Epega, but she started a chauffeur driving company and started using cars to drive people with her staff. So from that age where I thought a university was going to be given, I was left floating in the abyss because we didn't have financials. So for 1 year I had to work in a post office in London, and it was quite an eye-opener for me, but it didn't stop me from adapting. And again, adaptation helped me grow. So from being in a very wealthy family as a young man, coming to the age of 17 to become an adolescent, a grown-up, I realized that nothing is given. My father sadly was in a stroke, and when he had that stroke, he became semi-paralyzed. For another 30 years, he was semi-paralyzed. But my mother died quite soon after that time in a car crash on the road to Warri, because my Okrika side and Warri side is where my mom was from, even though my father was Ijebu. So my mother died at the age of, when I was 21, which was 20 actually, when I was starting university. And my father was semi-paralyzed. So I became the father of the family, even though my sisters were older and far more intelligent than me. But being the man, I had to take control of a lot of things. And I think that's what really gave me the tenacity to understand that I really need to be someone who doesn't just walk one field. I need to spread my risk. From my university, I did mathematical economics and Spanish. I was able to go to University, Queen Mary College, London University. And from there I finished, as I said, I worked again. So I worked before I went to uni, and then I worked afterwards. And for me, life is about collaboration, communication, and tenacity. And I think that those were my first 21 years. There were less people in Lagos in those days. I won't lie. I grew up every summer and even Christmas where we could afford it. Back in my day, 1978, 79, Naira was 0.8 to £1. So you can understand that people were very wealthy. I think in those days there was like 40 million people. It wasn't that much of it because my dad was an estate surveyor. So we used to go to Abuja a lot. And he was one of the surveyors that gridded Abuja when it was being built during the late 70s, 80s with Obasanjo, and even before Murtala Mohammed. They were gridding it. And Lagos, or should I say Abuja, was made the capital. And Abuja is a model city of Milton Keynes, which is a model city of Paris. Just like Brasilia in Brazil was changed from Rio de Janeiro as a capital. So for me, coming back to Lagos was a joy. I enjoyed it because I was young. We used to just walk, run the streets on our bicycles and cycling, just exploring. Everything was open. There weren't as many cars. It was no big apartments, and there weren't as many people. So I had a beautiful time. There were a lot of lizards on the ground, and we used to throw stones at them. But that was my own youth. We used to go to the beach a lot. Bar Beach was around. It's not around now. Sadly, my dad used to take me to Bar Beach to see the capital punishment killings of armed robbers, and even Dimka, who was one of the leaders of the coup d'etat against Murtala Mohammed. We saw him shot there. Saturdays was a big day, and NTA used to have a channel. I think they still have their studio there. So one of our aunties, Miss Julie Coker, was there. So we saw a different side of Nigeria. We would go to Ibadan. We'll go to Ijebu, we'll go to Benin, we'll go to Port Harcourt by road. In those days, you could travel, and along the way, we go to Akure, you pick up mangoes, you pick up coconuts, my dad will pick up palm wine, all these things on the road that I don't know if you get it now because security is an issue. So for me, it was a romantic time. I think fashion, evolving through Nigeria, has started as a siloed industry. By that I mean every individual was doing their own thing, whether they were a seamstress, a tailor, a designer, a stitcher, they were doing their own thing. But we are realizing that with the 200 plus million people we have in Nigeria, you can't be an individual alone doing your own thing. So the evolution of fashion that I've seen in my own small way, as someone who's worked in the industry, is that there's more collaboration. The designers are looking for hire specialist artisans to help with their stitching, the styling, and the putting together of clothes and accessories. So I'm also seeing small grassroots shoots, very small at the moment, of the government playing a part in bringing together some kind of foundation so people can articulate their fashion designs to the world, because we have seen it in a lot of music. Obviously, Afrobeat is one of our biggest exports in this country. Obviously, there's oil and all the others, but I'm talking about within this entertainment, luxury, lifestyle industries. So we're trying to learn from that how private sector can play a part to enhance this fashion sector. So now we're seeing a lot of vibrant colors, a lot of styles. Men's fashion is big. It's not just women's fashion. Men's grooming is massive. Hair and beauty as well. So men are taking care of ourselves more and more. And accessories. Accessories, I think, is fundamentally the quick fix of fashion, where we can enhance and create jobs and hyper growth in GDP by focusing on this. And this is where I implore the government with, working in mineral resources, our precious metals, semi-precious metals, help those industries to grow. There's a great lady, Janet Adeyemi, who works in Women in Business, and she is working within that. Let's help our fairer sex or the female gender to grow in business as well, because there's a fundamental knowledge that if half your population are women, as ours is roughly, or maybe 51%, 52%, you have to educate the women so they too can add to GDP. It's a simple economist theory. You can't leave them out of it because it's very important. And these industries in fashion are enhanced by women, and we need to push that forward. I think the banking system needs to be augmented, and I'm saying this from the government's perspective. The ease of doing business in Nigeria, as an investor myself, a foreign investor as well as being an indigent in Nigeria, the problem is not getting your money to Nigeria, it's getting your money out of Nigeria. Not that you want to suck all the money out of the country, but what can help is the floating exchange rates, the flow and liquidity of money that can come in and out of the country. A lot of investors are worried about how they get their money out of Nigeria. So I think our banking system, going back to the central bank, which they're working on, needs to be much more fluid. So people feel they can invest and take money out. But also, we need to articulate what is on offer. We need to start some kind of documentation of who is available to have investment with, where they can be found, because it's because we are quite an opaque economy, meaning that people can't see the end of where they're putting their money. Once we do that basis and open up the lights within which kind of businesses are available to be invested in, I think a lot of investors, domestic and international, will be more willing to put money to it. I think content creation for me has been an evolution. I started as an ex-banker, as I said. I used to trade futures and options in Barclays Bank. I was on the Life Exchange, trading bonds, and I found that wasn't my life. I wanted to be more closer to people. Some people can be bankers on the trading desk or trading floor, but not for me. So I started doing events. I was very lucky enough to show that I was quite adept at doing events. So a big company called Richemont, they owned Cartier, Dunhill, Hackett. They were part of British American Tobacco. They took me on to do their events. So I was doing a lot of polo matches, a lot of Christmas parties, a lot of brand activation events in England. So for me, I got a lot of content knowledge from that. Different styles, people, different countries. But in the last 10 years, I felt that helping companies like LinkedIn, Google, all kinds of big banks in Europe and America was not my remit. My business, EMC3, was going very strongly in America. But as a Nigerian man, I didn't feel love in America. I know that everyone says it's the land of opportunity, but being someone of my own African descent, I didn't like the mentality there. People are good, but the infrastructure is racist institutionally, as we know. So I felt I wanted to give something back to Nigeria. And with all the 20 years of, at that time, about 17 years of knowledge I gained from doing some of the best Grand Prix parties in the world, Formula One, around Monza, Silverstone, Abu Dhabi, I was doing a lot of events. I thought, let me take this back to Nigeria. I didn't have to come back to Nigeria. I wanted to. And I know with all our grievances with Nigeria, if you ask many Africans about Nigeria, they'll say, they look up to us. You guys, you have Chinua Achebe, you have Wole Soyinka, you have Fela Kuti. What's your problem? You have Chimamanda Adichie. What's your problem? So we have to take ownership and say, yeah, we do have all these people. We have Afrobeats, whether it's Burna Boy, Davido, the Venus Bushfires, all these different people that are exported. Let us look inside and say, wow, we do have a lot. So I wanted, as a content creator, to show Nigeria in all the different sectors that we do have a lot. And that's why with the marketing and communications company that I've started, my own company, I felt I could touch so many sectors. And finance, as I mentioned, I work with banks. Also government, Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission, a very great entity. I work in fashion, with brand labels and people across the board. There are great shops like Alara here that also promote African fashion and African business. And did you know even Leventis does a lot of research, Nigerian bottling company, to help this country. And do you know Nigeria was blowing glass almost 1,000 years before Europe knew glass blowing. And it's been found in Oyo State only recently. So it's very important that architecturally we take ownership of our country. The Nok civilization that has been in the mid to, I think it's above Abuja, near Benue, and even Niger River, above those basins, that has a lot of artifacts and a lot of archaeological excavation potential. But we've allowed that just to linger. People have stolen a lot of our artifacts. Nigeria was known for Benin bronzes. We were the best smelters of iron before people were smelting iron. So these are things we have to take stock of. And me as a content creator, I bring all that information together and I make sure that people acknowledge it and are aware of it. So then that will uplift us all. Now, this is a political question. But I believe with our background of the last 20, 30 years, we've had, sadly, leaders who have been militarily inclined, let's just call it that. And as we know, military people, they don't like educated people because educated people will ask questions. So we have had what we call a dismemberment of education in Nigeria for the last 35 years. And that has played an endemic part in retarding the gross domestic productivity of our country, because our youths and even people up to my age and older have not had the infrastructure, middle class education that is needed for a country to grow. You look at the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century in Europe, especially in Britain, and you look how they were expanded by merchants and artisans and specific skilled workers. Apprenticeships were big, education was huge. There was what they call a noblesse obligée, a nobility obligation, that people who are rich give back to institutions, not to church, to institutions that will help education. And that is where I think we've had a disconnect. Education was lacking. So for me, the way that we can help, it takes time. This new government is in. They are trying to implement the 8-point agenda, which is a good agenda. But everyone's looking for results now. Nigeria has been in a very bad state. There's global downturn. Obviously, cost of living is so high as it has been for a while. Nigeria is exacerbated, but in Europe, cost of living is high. There are some stupid wars going on around the world that has meant oil prices have skyrocketed. And with the rocketing of oil, everything goes up price-wise. So Nigeria needs to reevaluate education and apprenticeship. I believe even in fashion industry especially, apprenticeship is very important. Whether it's weaving, designing, marketing, online, whatever it is, factories, you need apprenticeship. And that's the quick fix of education. But education is fundamental to everything. Education of men and women, or girls and boys, both. Let's be honest, we need both sides of our genders to work together. Yoruba, we've always been what we call a dual binary kind of culture. We've always thought of male and female as one, and it's very important. Even in our names, Taiwo and Kehinde, you won't know if it's male or female. So we have to really educate ourselves that we can work together. And I think our women are our future. I can't even emphasize that more. And education is key. But it takes time. I think Japa syndrome is very real. Everyone wants a better life, let's not lie. You want a better life for yourselves, but for your family, your parents, your children. And the opportunities in Nigeria, even when you have been educated and you finish graduate here, to find jobs is not easy. The infrastructure is very bad for job creation. And this is being worked on, and the last 8 years has been fundamentally broken. But we know this new government is changing that. But specifically, JAPA in Canada, they need our brains. You go across the world and you ask any nation, especially America, who are the best educated, the best, integrated, and the most proficient people, Nigerians. So it's not that we are stupid, it's that we don't have the infrastructure at home. And America, Canada, Europe, they're giving us the infrastructure. So getting out of Nigeria is not easy. There are opportunities and policies that allow it, but going across the border to Libya is not the way. You spend $5,000, $4,000, which is almost 4 or 5 million naira to try and get to Europe, and then you're treated like a dog when you get there. That's not the way. But, there are certain policies that can take you to these countries. And in Britain, for instance, it's not all, the streets aren't paved in gold, but if you earn £1 in Britain, you send that home, that £1 is 1,300 naira. So, and the minimum wage is £14 an hour now in Britain. So you can do the maths of that. So someone who is earning £14 an hour, if they work 10 hours in a day, they've earned over £100, which is 100,000 naira. So the maths, of course, is what makes people want to go there, because even if you are working there, obviously you're paying British rates, so your rent, your cost of utilities, your food and drink, your transport comes into play. It's not cheap there. But the money you send, even if you're only sending £100 a month back to your mom, that's 100,000 naira. So, or 130,000 naira in today's rate. So you can do the maths. That's why people are going. And the security in these countries is, and the education, to be quite frank, is better. But it doesn't mean they are better. We have to build a house, you must thatch the roof from within, so your roof doesn't cave in. And I think that's very important. Not that people shouldn't go home, go out of the country, but they should always come home as they can. Because you see the Pakistanis doing it, you see the Indians doing it, you see the Arabs, they go home and they build their own countries. It's not good to just japa and live. You have to come home small. I think my success is down to, as much as I can say a success, because it's still a book that is not finished and the stories are still unwritten, is a tenacity of hard work. It's very important that people understand that it takes a lifetime to look like an overnight success. It doesn't just come. What I'm still doing, I'm not the most successful in my business, but I love my business. And if you can find something that you love and you can make money out of, then you're in heaven on earth, to be quite frank. I think my spirituality and my faith is very important, as is my wife's. My wife, Helen Epega, she wrote the world's first Pidgin English opera. And we've been staging it here in London. We played in Cape Town, in Nairobi, and in Lagos, sorry. And we've staged it in London. We're at the Royal Albert Hall next year. I'm executive producer of that. So I think my success, to add to that, is that I put all my eggs in one basket. And I work very hard to make sure I research and obtain knowledge of the next thing, or what was the last thing. I'm a historian as well. And I put things in perspective. And I try to add value as I can. But as my momsy used to say, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So I like to listen as well. And from children you can learn, from grandpapa you can learn. So humility is very important. I'm not arrogant with it. And I think that's the most important part. Collaboration, humility, and shared drive. But also knowing that for me, Saturday and Sunday, I'm off. That's my time for the family. I take a break. Sunday, even God rested on the 7th day. Me too, I rest. I'm not 24/7, even though this weekend we have a big fashion event, but that's work. But when I take my tools down, it's tools down. No one can call me on Sunday morning. So you can't be BOing to people. Never let anyone own you like that. That's what I say. Someone calling you on Sunday morning, obviously in journalism, in film, it's a different from projects. I'm not saying every time, but just be aware of yourself and your mental health. That's the most important. Sure. The world's first pidgin English opera is a show about a Nigerian fabled people. It's almost like Orisha, but it's not. There are people who are Mami Waters as well as they are spiritual people. They are the guardians of the galaxy, to use an expression. There is God, the all-faithful God, and the all-knowing God, omniscient, omnipotent. But below that, there are all these almost demigods that look after, let's say, this sector of the universe. And these people are singers. They sing opera. But they sing it with pidgin English. And you know, pidgin is a language that is known by most Nigerians, but it's a language that people shun and say, it's a bad language. But they speak pidgin in Hawaii. They speak pidgin in China. They speak pidgin, Old English Cockney is pidgin. American even is a form of pidgin because they Yankified English. So what my wife has done, Helen Epega, she's also known as the Venus Bushfires. She is an Afrofuturist musician. She composes songs. So she put together this compilation, which is a pidgin English opera musical. And it's a show that lasts for about 45 minutes or an hour and a half. It depends if you're doing the short version or long version. So we have tenors, we have sopranos, we have violinists, we have kura player, and my wife plays something called the hang, which is like two tortoise shell steel drums that sound like a harp. And she plays that and she sings. She's the main protagonist in this. And it's a drama about all these people that have come, the many people who are meant to look after the planet, but they lose their voice. So Earth is, because God is angry with them, the Earth, and says these people are rubbish. But the many people say to God, please give them one more chance. They're not that bad. I know they're fighting, there's lots of wars, but give them another chance. So the lead Kanate of these many people has to go to the Venus Bushfire, which is the heavenly celestial place, to bring the voice back, to sing Earth back into harmony. So it's a drama, and it kind of plays on our old cultural awareness in Africa and heritage of Nigeria of there are other beings. And you must have faith in your ancestors as well as in the God and the deities. As we know in Yoruba, I think there are 7 deities, and these are very important cultural awareness that we try to give to children as well. I think the filmmaking in Nigeria is burgeoning. AFRIF, the African Film Festival, International Film Festival, is on now, which is a great show. I helped incept in 2010, many years ago. We had it in Port Harcourt. It was Governor Rotimi Amici that started that campaign, but it's going on very strongly now. Nollywood, as we call it, is being noticed by the international market, whether it's Netflix or Hollywood. I would like to tell you something actually, which is, I haven't divulged this for many years. My great uncle, whose name is Pa Orlando Martins, God rest his soul, was one of the first African actors in Hollywood. He acted in the 30s with people like Ronald Reagan, Katharine Hepburn, and Bob Hope. And he always played a part as an African prince or chief. He was never like denigrated or made into a lower African slave or anything. And I think that instilled something in my mind with this film industry. I think it's very important that Nigeria, as it is, we have some great actors like Wale Ojo and Ramsey Noah. They are playing part in producing their own shows. And it's very important. Like in America, you obviously have people like Mel Gibson, Robert De Niro, who have produced their own films as well. That Nigerians are not just actors or technicians, they are also producers and directors. It's very important that we have that link within our industry. And we make friends and we forge relationships, not just with Hollywood. There's Bollywood, the Indian industry, and there's also China, because China's film industry is massive. Technically, I think just as big as Hollywood. So we must look to ourselves in Africa as well. There's some great film makers from Zimbabwe, South Africa, Ghana, and I think collaboration is, I always use collaboration because I would not be here without collaboration. Obviously, my wife, you collaborate with your spouse, but also my businesses. I have very good English business partner. He's really a business partner. I've started a new business. I collaborate with all kinds of industries and different sectors. So for film industry, I think it's important that we push our heritage forward, because people want to know about Nigeria. They love, in Africa, they love Nollywood stories, and that's a fact. And we can expand by using distribution. Distribution is key. Netflix, all the Hollywood film houses, negotiate with them. Even if you don't get the best price for this show, make sure you check your contract, make sure you get it for your next film. So I think that's important, distribution. While I'm still alive, that's a very good question. Hope springs eternal with me, and I am optimistic about Nigeria. I think Nigeria is not what we all will think it will be. It's something it's a country that needs to be more fluid. We have in diaspora a lot of powerful individuals and groups. I think we need to connect even more with those individuals and groups who need to invest in Nigeria. Our youth is very talented and is very able, but it's also very abundant. So we need to find a way to link up education, apprenticeship to these youth, to give them something that is productive to work in. And that means expanding your mind as parents. It's not just doctors, lawyers, bankers that we need. We need artisans, we need creatives. And that's the most important point. It's a mind block. So for me, if we can work on Nigeria's mind psyche and the taboos of oh, we don't want our child to marry a musician. You know, even as a musician, you don't just have to be a rapper. You could be a music engineer, you could be a filmmaker, you could be an engineer that works with the technical aspects of editing, you could be a designer. There are so many aspects. So I say to my utopian Nigeria, learn from your brothers and sisters. International research online is very important. And for me, the dream is to see Nigeria as a fluid country of strength in Africa, where we're trading with African countries and we're using what we have as our asset. Technically, of course, we need Europe and America and everything, but we have it in Africa. We have it in Nigeria. So my beauty of Nigeria would be if we become our own Wakanda, working with other African states and enhancing our own GDP as well as our region and our continent's GDP working together. Gosh, my favorite, what's the first one? Food. As you can see, I like my food. I like a mixture actually. I like amala. I like yams. I swallow very well. Whether it's with ogbono soup, that's very good. But also, from my mother's riverside, there's one okra, seafood okra that my mom used to make. And I still strive to find that. I go and find that whenever I go away. In London, you have some nice Nigerian restaurants, and in Lagos, of course, as across Nigeria. But nothing like home cooking. When my wife makes me a nice, I suppose she makes a egusi for me, eba, and that's my staple. My best music, I love Afrobeats, of course, but predominantly I'm a Fela man. Ebenezer Obey. I like the old styles. And I also like Zaire music. There's high life that comes across Africa. But to be a lie to say I don't like Jimi Hendrix. I like Jimi Hendrix. He's a guitarist, a Native American, African-American guitarist. I love his kind of music. So those are my mainstays. And Gorillaz and De La Soul are still very great music of mine. Those are my Spotify at the moment. What was the other question? I like wrestling. They used to call it Gidigbo. back in the day, Yoruba wrestling. I used to love that. I haven't seen that much lately, but I like Nigerian wrestling. Obviously, we play good football. We're great footballers as well, globally. But you said Nigerian sports. Polo. Nigeria. I like Nigerian polo as well. To my young brethren and children of Nigeria, I say it's important hard work. Hard work, research, and belief in yourself. Obviously, times are very tough at the moment, and money is tight. But with your own creativity, you can build your empire from there. I always believe that from one's mind, you can make wealth, and you shouldn't give up. Obviously, if you're not very great at one thing, you find what you are great at. But always be honest with yourself and treat others how you want to be treated. And remember, collaboration is the key or the little sister of success. And always have a smile. Very important. That's what I say.
Good morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruwoje, and Ida Hosa Osamanze.
Sustain that industry. So if government does not have much money, they should find an enabling environment.
Now, what are these issues? The petrol is still imported because local refineries are not working.
Does it stop at giving a directive? What should be done to ensure that this is done?
One of the factors being identified by our key persons is the issue of transportation. For you to have a sustainable city, you must have a deliberate attempt to have a master plan.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
All right, it's another beautiful day, another great time for us to talk about business, finance, national issues, and issues that has to do with the economy. I am Femi Ayodele. As you know, that Early Exchange, it's all about shaping policy and advanced development. With our conversation today, our conversation is going to center on the World Food Day, because today is World Food Day. For those of you who think food is important, everybody knows that food is important, not that you just think food is important. The essence of having a special day like this is to draw the awareness on the existence of hunger and the need for us to do whatever we need to do to ensure that we feed the nation and the world. We'll also be looking at the issue of tax policy as far as Nigeria is concerned, and the need for us to engage in reforms and some of the issues related to tax policies in Nigeria. We hope that to spend the next 3 hours with us will make your day remarkable with our conversation with our guest. All right, let's set the ball rolling. Let's go. Before we delve into the discussion for today, we'll go on a short break now.
Amamoke.
My name is Raymond Bola Brown.
My name is Larry, and I play Afro reggae music.
Hi, my name is Fred Amata, and you are on to Souq News.
If you are watching this channel for the first time, make sure you continue to watch it, because this is Souq News.
Shout out to Souq News. Actually, I don't know. I really enjoyed the little moment I spent with you, and I think with more of this.
Souq News. Here's the Souq News, who had the courage to transcend a locked-off camera and actually have a conversation with a human being. It's a pleasure, Souq News. Thank you very much.
If you want to advertise your product, just come here and let us help you to get to places. Yeah, you can't do it alone, no. You need this channel to do it for you.
On social media, many Nigerian young companies were celebrating, wow, we raised Series C, we raised Series D. And anytime they raised these monies, everybody hailed them. But what was behind it? What is behind every raise is that the entrepreneur founder is diluted significantly. We had a very interesting session, and in one of the sessions, there was a role play about a case study on CWG PLC, which is a company that I founded. And the case was written by Columbia Business School to discuss a point about venturing, about entrepreneurship, and about funding for the enterprise. And the case ended on the question, should Austin Okere take the venture capital investment or should he reject it? Just a little bit of background. So this is a company, CWG, in 2005 that was doing very well. It was riding on the back of the Y2K that just happened at the turn of the century, was riding on the back of the telecom boom that happened immediately after the civilian government of OBJ and GSM was launched, was riding on the back of the bank consolidation in 2005 that was done by Governor Soludo. And in each of these booms, CWG had positioned and taken good advantage. So this is not a company that was in dire need of cash or was desperate in 2005. But we had a plan to list our shares on the stock market, and we thought that the best way to do it was to first do either a private placement or, better still, to do a venture capital fundraise so that they will bring discipline into our operations, governance, strengthen our governance, and of course, bring more technical knowledge. And if people saw that this company was invested in you, probably it will make the listing on the stock exchange more attractive. The issue here is at what price? And I remember that I've discussed something similar on this on social media, where many Nigerian young companies were celebrating, wow, we raised Series C, we raised Series D. And anytime they raised these monies, everybody hailed them. But what was behind it? What is behind every raise is that the entrepreneur founder is diluted significantly. So if I use CWG as a case study, the case that was written by Columbia was that there was an offer of $8 million for 25% of the company, putting the valuation post at $32 million. Make no mistake, the Treasury bill's interest rate is 15% sometimes. Now, if someone is going to bring his money to invest in your company, he's looking for way more than that 15%, given that there's a high risk that his money will not come back. And the rule of thumb is that they're looking for 3 times what they brought in within 5 years. So in our case, they were going to be asking for $24 million within 5 years, or you list and give them a liquidity event or an exit. You have to check very well that this $8 million that you're taking in, you can do business in such a way that the value of the company can cough out $24 million in 5 years, regardless of exchange loss. Here is where it gets complicated. So you receive $8 million, which is converted to you in Naira. 2005 probably was about 130. Now, whether the Naira suffers devaluation or not, you're going to pay that $8 million. Now, paying $8 million 5 years later, where the Naira is maybe 250 or 260, whilst you are generating your revenue in Naira, becomes almost impossible. And if the venture capital firm then has to take assets because you can't pay, he will end up owning of course, a big chunk of your company, nothing at all, you begin to look like a management staff in the company you founded. So in our own case, we held out and we didn't take the money. And in 2009, when we took a subsequent one, the company was valued at $55 million, plus that there'd been an exchange loss. So the company was valued much more than the $32 million, and plus the fact that in Naira terms, they would have owned more of our company. My point being, don't sell your seed. Rather, till your seeds, let it grow into a fruit, and sell at the fruit, because the fruit is plentiful. A lot of our startups rush out to sell their seed, and they sell it cheap. To complete that story, we actually then listed the company in 2013 for $90 million. Now, I did a rough calculation. If we were in dire need of money and we borrowed $8 million at an interest rate of 20%, at that time Naira, we'll be returning Naira money, and we'll be returning something like, even if you take 100%, we'll be returning another $8 million in 5 years' time. But given that the company's valuation had gone to $55 million in that time, 2009, when the second PE company invested, we would have been better off taking the debt, because we'll be returning an extra $8 million, rather than 8 times 3, which is 24, that would have had to give $24 million that would have had to pay the VC company if we had taken the money at that time. So the delta is huge in terms of debt versus equity. So the point is, at some point in time, equity seems cheap, deceptively, but debt is cheaper. Especially at the early stages, what you have is a seed. You don't sell your seed. Have patience, hone it, bootstrap it, take debt to finance specific deals, makes you disciplined, and then when you have your fruit, you can then invite investors to come, and you make more, and you don't lose a huge percentage of your company. You actually do still own a huge percentage of your company. Be patient. Don't rush out to collect funds and celebrate it. You will have to pay back. Thank you.
Idumota Market. Eko Idumota, once a residential neighborhood, is home to Idumota Market located on Lagos Island. It is one of the oldest and arguably one of the largest markets in West Africa. Idumota is a historic neighborhood adjacent to the Lagos port that facilitated the slave trade, and later, under the British indirect rule, it surrounded to exports that fueled the colonial enterprise. Idumota was also the location of an Armed Forces Remembrance Cenotaph called Soja Idumota, built as a monument to Nigerian soldiers who served with the West African Frontier Force. An Eyo Masquerade statue and a clock tower are also some monuments at Idumota. Idumota Market is so popular that large sales are recorded as early as 7 a.m. The market is made up of hundreds of locked-up shops occupying several multi-story buildings, with some measuring about 5 or more floors. In 2010, the Lagos State government demolished some illegal structures in order to improve vehicular and human movement in and around the markets. During weekdays, the neighborhood of Idumota is densely populated by shoppers, traders, and bus passengers. From the Carter Bridge ascending into Lagos Island, passengers can see the neighborhood before disembarking as their final destination. Idumota market accommodates the substantial inflow of imported goods. The bulk of import from abroad are routed first through Idumota and then on to other markets through Nigeria and other West and Central African countries. The energy of private Idumota traders and wholesalers facilitate this activity, where millions of US dollars worth of wholesale is exchanged daily. Idumota markets, Souq Enlightenment.
Because local refineries are not working.
Does it stop at giving a directive? What should be done to ensure that this is done?
One of the factors being identified by our key persons is the issue of transportation. For you to have a sustainable city, you must have a deliberate attempt to have a master plan.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
All right, it's still Early Exchange, and our focus today is going to be on tax reforms and regulations. Our main discussion today is going to center on tax policies in Nigeria. How far has Nigeria gone when it comes to tax collection, looking at all the regulations that have taken place over the years. And we're being joined by Babatunde Salau, who is the head internal control and compliance at Ikres Agroallied Industry Limited. Is our guest today. Babatunde, glad to have you join us on Early Exchange this morning.
Yeah, thank you, presenter. Good morning. How was your night?
Cool. So let's start the discussion with this. Nigeria, according to statistics, has one of the lowest world collection rates when it comes to tax in the world, about 10.8%, compared to the GDP. What's your take on this? Why do you think we have this kind of figure, one of the lowest tax collection in the world?
Well, thank you, presenter. I want to thank you for this privilege given to me to be part of this program, to hear my view on the current tax policies and tax implementation in Nigeria. Well, we all know our country being what we have in terms of tax process, tax collection and administration. Of course, I won't dwell too much on the challenges that we've been having, but we all know that Nigeria, as a whole, is very dynamic and a multifaceted country in the community of nations. Of course, Nigerians' tax policy has developed and metamorphosed into different stages and up to where we are today. We have been having a lot of tax reforms, regulations. We have been amending just to ensuring that it suits the present environment, economic environment. Of course, you all agree with me that during the time of COVID, there was a Finance Act that was promulgated, and up to now, we've still been battling with one amendment or the other. Yeah, you see, Nigeria, we are in such a country that we have so much, how will I put it, so much hydro resources that we cannot be able to tap. That is, we have not been able to gravitate the modality to be able to harness it very well. Of course, just you have rightly said, we have so much challenges that are bedeviling Nigerians' tax policy that has made us not to grow from where we are. And just as you said, that when you look at the ratio of our GDP to tax, it's quite very low. Even in African nations, Nigeria is still, battling with between 5% to 6% until maybe 2 or 3 years ago that it grew. We were able to grow to maybe 10 point something percent, but that's not too bad. That's not too bad, at least in the trend of the years that we've been having. But we are not doing enough. In Africa, we have the lowest, one of the lowest GDP, tax to GDP ratio, and we need to do more in that. Of course, you just asked about the challenges. One of it, majorly, we have a lot of hidden economy. There's so much that we've not been able to harness properly into our tax net in this country. Few of it is just the digital economies. Of course, digital economies are so wide, so humongous, and so has a lot of potential for us to be able to harness, but we are not serious about that in this country. But I want to say that some of all these things needs to be looked into. Of course, when you look at our even tax laws, a lot of instability in our tax law. We have one law today, another law tomorrow, a lot of amendments here and there. All these policies, all these tax laws are not encouraging. We should be able to be stable with our tax policy. Of course, the act of professionalism in the collection process is dwindling in this tax world, particularly in Nigeria, which we need to look into. And also, we've not been able to move away from our traditional means of tax collection. When I mean traditional means of moving away from, the traditional means of tax collection revolves around the manual process. But I think the whole world, we are not in jet age. IT is everywhere. We need to graduate from that traditional way to a digital way of collecting taxation, or kind of automation, IT, use of technology to be able to harness our tax revenue, and also to block all leakages. Of course, we all know that because of the fact that we have been overburdening our oil revenue, and that is why we fail to look at the other revenue, which is taxation. Of course, we all know that, quite as usual, what people used to say, Nigeria is a mono economy. We have been tailoring towards oil revenue. But I think it's high time we look at other revenue, particularly taxation. And it's going to be a cash cow if Nigeria is able to look at that critically. Thank you.
All right, let's look at some of the various types of taxes in Nigeria. Let's look at their roles and how significant they've been over the years and the need for reforms. If you look at some of these, an example is value-added tax, personal income tax. So let's look at some of these taxes and then how successful, if in your own opinion, they've been over the years.
Thank you very much. Well, let me start by saying that we have different types of taxes. Of course, we have the personal income tax, which can be divided into two. Of course, pay as you earn, and personal income tax from other groups of the societies. Of course, we have the company income tax, we have the capital gain tax, and we have petroleum tax and value-added tax. Also, we also have other taxes like excise duty, excise duties, import duties, and others. But let me just narrow it down to real tax, which borders on direct and indirect. Of course, we all know that over time, Nigeria has evolved various tax laws, amendment to suit the current economic dictates. Of course, when you look at, I want to mention personal income tax. When you look at personal income tax, which is a direct tax, Nigeria has a lot of opportunity to harness resources, a lot of tax revenue from that. When you look at personal income tax, I would say that Nigeria, we have not really grown it to ensure that large populace are able to comply with this. Let me take, for instance, look at the informal sector. Informal sector, I'm happy that Nigeria was able to come up with PITA, what we call PITA, Personal Income Tax Amendment Act in 2011, which was able to revolutionize personal income tax, which is PIT, and being extended to informal sector. Of course, when we are talking of informal sector, they are the people, they are the class of or categories of taxpayers that don't pay, that don't keep records. But I tell you, they form more than 90% or 80% of the populace in this country. Of course, we have the artisans, we have the market, we have lots of them. But how have we been able to harness these taxpayers into our tax net? It has been a problem. It has been a problem. The personal income tax that we are talking about, predominantly have been harnessed from the salary earners, and which I think it should be expanded beyond that. Of course, the informal sector can be grown, and we also have the categories of individuals, the personalities, the high net worth individuals that have been hidden. We've not been able to capture them. Of course, we all know that our data collections have been very porous in this country, but I think we can do more to be able to look at that very well. And of course, I'll keep on saying that our major stakeholders, which is the bank, that the government can really use to harness some of all these things. Of course, we have potentials to grow very well. Then that is on a personal income tax. But we can also look at the corporate tax. Of course, corporate tax a company income tax has been doing very well, and which is handled by the Federal Inland Revenue. I think Federal Inland Revenue can seek to more. Of course, we have been having a lot of reforms. Of course, we have the recent Finance Act that has been able to grant the turnover. We have 25 billion. This is how much you pay. 30 million. This is how much you pay in terms of rate. Yes, which is very good to encourage industry. But I think we can still do more on the collection process. We might not necessarily need to increase our tax rates, but what we need to do is to expand our tax base. Our tax base is wide in this country. There are so many companies that are not complying with tax payments, but I think the Federal Inland Revenue Service can still do more on that aspect. Ditto to states when it comes to the implementation or the enforcement of the personal income tax. But by and large, corporate tax, of which is company income tax, has been doing very, very well. So it has been contributing enormously to the bottom line of tax in Nigeria. Of course, value-added tax, of course, very, very fantastic. We all know that VAT is a consumption tax, which dwells on what we buy and what we sell. So, but I think we can still do more because there are a lot of transactions that are being mitigated against being VATable. And that is why we have constant review of items that are VATable, items that are not VATable, and this thing. But I think increasing VAT rate, to me, is good, but I think we have the effect of it on goods and services, which we all know, whether we like it or not. Of course, we transfer the cost to the final consumer. It still speaks on inflation, but I think we should do more. The government should do more to expand the base rather than looking at the rates. Of course, value-added tax has been doing very well. Of course, it's being contributed or it's been distributed or being given to the three tiers of government. The federal government, I think 15%, the state government 50%, and the local government has its own shares of it. But I think we can do more on that. There are a lot of transactions that goes unvatable, but which legitimately they are vatable. Of course, we have other taxes as well. Import duties, excise duties, and some of other charges and levies that governments can harness very well. But I think we can do more by providing adequate infrastructures, governance, so that there will be a voluntary compliance on the part of the populace. Of course, Nigerians are willing to comply once governments on the other side can be able to justify what they do with taxes. So personal income tax and company income tax and VAT they constitute large portions of tax to the bottom lines of tax revenue in Nigeria. Of course, petroleum profit tax is also there, which I think it's also very large. But I think we can still do more to be able to harness some of all this by looking into our tax law, by looking into our ethics code of conduct and professionalism in the act of collecting some of these tax revenue. Of course, lastly, I will mention that most of all these tax relevant tax authorities are not being professional. They need to do more. They need to go all out there. They need to be creative. They need to explore technology to be able to drive their revenue, which I think is the new order now, being embraced by most relevant tax authorities. Federal government, on the part of Federal Inland Revenue Service, they are not relenting in that. Just of recent, they were able to promulgate laws or develop a kind of IT to be able to drive gaming revenue. But I think they can still do more on some of all these things by doing a kind of peer review, by studying what happens in other climates, how are they doing it better, such that we can be able to harness our tax revenue. But largely, government needs to prove to the society that tax revenue is being utilized effectively and efficiently.
Right, still on the issue of value-added tax, you're aware that there was this tussling between the Federal Inland Revenue and some state tax collection agencies about who has the statutory when it comes to the collection of value-added tax. What do you make of this development, about this clash of interest, and what should be done to ensure that these are well spread out in order to ensure that there's no clash of interest when it comes to tax collection, especially VAT this time around?
Well, there are two sides of a coin. Well, VAT, according to law, is collected by federal governments. And when it is collected, it is being shared among the three tiers of government. Of course, the local governments, the state governments, and federal governments. I know that about 1 or 2 years ago, there have been this clamor that there should be a derivation. There should be a derivation factors of VAT, such that the VAT that is being collected in each state should go back to their state. In fact, the state should be in charge of the VAT that happens in their domain. But it is about law, and of course, unless there's an amendment to that. But in my own opinion, I believe that that phenomenon or that system is something that we should be looking into. Like when you look at Lagos State and when you look at River State, and Ogun State, some other states, they contribute large chunk of VAT to the federal government. But by the time it is being distributed, of course, they have various formula they deduce. So how do you expect a state that is lying out, that is just there, that they are not ready to harness their own resource, they are not able to think outside the box, the academic activities, economic activities is so low, and you expect them to share the same thing with other states like Lagos and Rivers. So, but I think that aspect needs to be looked into. Some states can afford to fold their arms, and after all, whether we like it or not, revenue will come to my state. And part of this revenue includes VAT. So it is demotivational to other states. It is not encouraging to other states to look inward. To look inward and be able to harness their resources, because most of these VAT collections, huge amount of VAT that's been collected by this state goes to the federal purse. And the federal courts will now distribute it in their own way to every state according to the formula. But this is not too ideal. But I think presently, because of the nationality that we embrace, and because of federal character principle, I think we need to still look at that until maybe another world when we have a very good, even development in this country. Of course, agitation of other states that no, this won't happen. But like we have a region in this country. Of course, let me mention to the specific north. Of course, they feel that if VAT is goes down the issue of derivation, they felt they might be shortchanged compared to southern part of this country. But I think they should look inward as well to be able to harness more, tap other resources that are lying idle here. Most of them rely on oil, and they believe that oil is there, and once there's allocation, they are going to get their own shares part of it. I think it's not too good. But for now, my candid opinion is that we can still leave it at this because of the nationality and the federal character principle. We want to grow, and we cannot leave our brothers and sister states to be shortchanged in some of all these national resources called Commonwealth. But I believe that by the time we're able to get there, we have system structure, institutional development. We have pragmatic development in this country. We have a lot of infrastructures are put in place. We have working economies. Then we can begin to think of that derivation of VAT. But I tell you, the view, the school of thought being embraced by those states are not out of place or out of content. They are very, very much in order. But we need to look at the Nigeria as a republic, the Nigeria as a national, the Nigeria as confederation. So that is the way, federation, and that is the way we have to look at it for now. Thank you.
All right. The federal government has set up a tax reforms committee to look at the issue of tax regulations and harmonize all the taxes you have in Nigeria. The committee is being headed by Taiwo Yedele, and they are targeting the GDP ratio to tax about at least 18%. How optimistic are you? Do you think this is going to see the light of the day? And what is what's your thought about these reforms? And then how soon will it turn to reality?
Yes, thank you. Taiwo Oyedele, too much I know about him is someone that I believe he can turn around the tax reforms. From his background, we all know that he's a tax expert, and he knows what he's doing and what he's coming up with. Well, tax reforms, we actually need it. There are a lot of loopholes in our tax system, and which we have to look at. I believe that by the time he's able to co-opt various professionals, various technocrats on board, not theorists, not people that read textbooks alone, but people that actually in practice, people that actually know the downfield, that feel the heat, that knows what it is, come on board and be able to join hand with him to reform this tax in Nigeria. Of course, our president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, of course, we're doing the right thing, trying to put the round peg in a round hole by bringing on board people that are resumes, people that are very, very good in tax policy. Over the years, we've not been having that. But I think there will be a kind of a paradigm shift in these tax reforms, and there are going to be a lot of changes. But we might not be able to see the effects now, because some of the changes we have to go through legislation, some of the changes we have to go through a lot of pronouncements that we need to test. But by and large, it's coming to fruition. And it's coming to fruition would mean that our GDP, our tax to GDP will begin to rise. Will begin to increase by the time some of all these things begins implementation. But I think Nigeria should, the tax policy, the reform, the committee should also think outside the box by looking at microeconomies, by looking at hidden economies, by looking at those economies that have been very, very complex and difficult to be able to harness revenue from, despite the fact that they generate huge amount of revenue from this, huge amount of income from this country, but they have been escaped, been taxed. So they need to look at our tax laws, they need to look at the legislations, they need to look at the implementation modalities, and they need to look at the technology, which is very, very important. But I think I have so much credence in this tax reform, because I know the step they have begun justifies that they are going. But my advice to them is we should look less of a increase in rates, which I think, to me, according to my school of thoughts, is not a too good system or indices to be able to heighten revenue. But we can look at the base, expansion of our base. Our base is very, very crucial, because you can't have less than 30% of populace contributing tax or paying tax. We need to expand it. We need to do a lot of data collection. We need to be able to harness and work with corporate organizations, work with government establishment like CAC. We need to look at that. We need to work with banks. We need to be able to look at the areas we are not looking at. There are a lot of idle resources that we can look at. We are not looking at solid minerals in this country. So that I believe that this committee will be able to do justice to some of all these areas that we have not been looking at in the previous years in this country.
Let's look at this issue of tax invasion. You agree with me that's one of the issues to contend with. How can government tackle this issue of tax invasion in spite the level of awareness, in spite the level of education? You still see that this still persists. How can this be addressed?
Well, thank you for this. Of course, evasion and tax avoidance are things that they are part of the system, tax drive system, in terms of tax administrations and tax policies and enforcement. Well, it's one of the major bane of our revenue growth in this country, particularly taxation. Like, before I even dwell on this particular tax evasion, we will not talk about tax business or enterprise in this country without mentioning governance. Governance is very key to every nation, and that is the benchmark we need to look at. Permit me to make reference to United Kingdom. Of course, major source of revenue to that country is tax. But I've seen someone that came into this country that willingly visited a relevant tax authority that I want to pay my tax. I just came back from this country. That is to say that the culture that has been imbibed in that person brought it into Nigeria. But I think there's a need for government to change its attitude towards tax enterprise vis-a-vis governance. We need to do more in terms of governance. Governance trigger a lot of things. And when governance is in place, of course, we might not have everything provided by the government, but government should be seen to be thorough, should be seen to be able to make use of this tax revenue for development and for the progress of the communities, of the societies. Yeah, the issue of evasion, we cannot totally erase it in the tax world, but we can only mitigate it by a lot of systems in place. One, proper enforcement needs to be done, need to be embraced by various relevant tax authority. Of course, enforcement goes very, very critical and is very, very important. The act of enforcement comes with a lot of things. Once we have proper tax procedures that are being followed, I want to call on tax administrations, the various tax administrators, to really look into this. And that is why we have a lot of litigations, tax litigation, objections and all that. That's why I also mentioned that the professionalism is very, very key. Our tax administrator must embrace professionalism in the act of doing their business, the tax business. Of course, we have statutory numbers of days, but we serve notice and assessment, you do all that. There are statutory numbers of days. But by the time some of all these things are not kept, you will see some of all these taxpayers hiding under tax avoidance, under the loopholes. And that is very, very critical. We need to embrace an holistic tax administration, effective tax administration very, very well. And enforcement comes into this. Enforcement is the last thing. Of course, you can't enforce without following the normal procedures. Enforcement must be able to kill once you have that. Of course, another aspect we can look at is most of our laws should be amended such that various stakeholders, such as banks, can be really discussed with. But the law has been very, very critical to pass because the most affected people are the bourgeoisie of the society, the crime of the society. Failure of most of our crimes of the society to declare their income is a major lacuna that the government needs to look at. But how will government be able to chase them? Most of our rich men don't pay taxes. Just for instance, the implementation, I'm looking at Abuja, for instance, the implementation of property tax in Abuja. How do you think we can annex it? Yes, we can annex it, but there will be a lot of resistance in this until we have enabling, the wherewithal to be able to go into that. So our implementation is another area. We need to look at our implementations, our tax, our implementation tax. We need to look at it very well. For instance, if we have property tax that or maybe land charge that you are expected to pay, but willingly, people are not ready to pay unless you are able to serve them the notice, you are able to enforce, and some of all these things. So I think our enforcement need to grow very well. Then another aspect is looking at our law. We need to look at a law that are friendly to the society. We must not have a Draconian law. We must not have too high-handed law. Like to me, the increase of value-added tax from 5% to 7.5% is how will I put it? Is not it's unproductive. It's a quick avenue to drive away the real sectors of this economy, to really relegate them to background. This of course, whether we like it or not, it's one part of the cost. Whether we are going to transfer it or
we need to wrap up now.
Users must definitely bear the cost. So we need to look at that. We need to look at some of all these tax laws and improve on it. Thank you.
All right. We must appreciate you for spending time with us, for sharing your thoughts on the issue of tax reforms and regulations in Nigeria. We just have to wrap up now. Thank you so much, Babatunde Salau, for spending time with us on Early Extinct this morning.
Oh, thank you so much. It's my pleasure. You are welcome. Thank you, Nigerians. Thank you, my viewers.
Right, we're due for another break now. We'll go on the break, and when we return, we'll have more discussion on Early Exchange. Stay with us.
Idumota Market. Eko Idumota, once a residential neighborhood, is home to Idumota Market located on Lagos Island. It is one of the oldest and arguably one of the largest markets in West Africa. Idumota is a historic neighborhood adjacent to the Lagos port that facilitated the slave trade and later, under the British indirect rule, it surrounded to exports that fueled the colonial enterprise. Idumota was also the location of an armed forces remembrance cenotaph called Soja Idumota, built as a monument to Nigerian soldiers who served with the West African Frontier Force. An Eyo Masquerade statue and a clock tower are also some monuments at Idumota. Idumota Market is so popular that large sales are recorded as early as 7 a.m. The market is made up of hundreds of locked-up shops occupying several multi-story buildings, with some measuring about 5 or more floors. In 2010, the Lagos State government demolished some illegal structures in order to improve vehicular and human movement in and around the markets. During weekdays, the neighborhood of Idumota is densely populated by shoppers, traders, and bus passengers. From the Carter Bridge ascending into Lagos Island, passengers can see the neighborhood before disembarking at their final destination. Idumota Market accommodates the substantial inflow of imported goods. The bulk of import from abroad are routed first through Idumota and then on to other markets through Nigeria and other West and Central African countries. The energy of private Idumota traders and wholesalers facilitate this activity, where millions of US dollars worth of wholesale is exchanged daily. Idumota Markets, Souq Enlightenment.
This is done.
One of the factors being identified by our key persons is the issue of transportation. For you to have a sustainable city, you must have a deliberate attempt to have a master plan.
This is early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
All right, it's early exchange and it's getting bigger and better. To let you know it's getting bigger, there's someone here with me, and that's Blessing. Blessing is here. Blessing, glad to have you this morning.
Good morning. Happy rainy day.
Yeah, you know, the rain almost changed the pattern for the day. But
yes, but you know, as much as the rain tries, it never succeeds at changing the way things are done around here.
Exactly. So we're here today. We're looking at tax reforms, and we've had a discussion, you know, with Babatunde, who talked about the need for reforms. You know, he had to do an analysis of the present state of tax reforms in Nigeria. According to him, we've come a long way, and even though he emphasized on the need for more reforms, and he also believes in the presidential committee being set up to look at the issue of tax reforms, that they will do their best, looking at the antecedents of the chairman of the committee, which is Taiwo Oyedele. But now we want to look at the issue of, business taxation in Nigeria, and then what has been your experience in recent times?
Oh, okay. Regarding businesses, taxation of businesses, I would like to begin from the point where I commend the current administration. You know, that some taxes were suspended, and pushed to September. That was just to give a kind of relief to businesses because of the removal of fuel subsidies. So in that regard, I say the government has done well. But where we have the challenge basically is not even at the federal level, it's at the local government level, because the local governments have the authority to charge whatever levy or impose levies on businesses that run within the local government. That's where we actually see the issue of multiple taxation come up for businesses, and that's one thing that a lot of businesses have been crying out against: multiple taxation. Now, the Federal Inland Revenue Service have their taxes well structured, but at the local government level, it's supposed to be that way. Now, if a business, for instance, is paying maybe excise duty because of the kind of production that, or manufacturing that they're into, but they operate within a particular local government. Local government is also charging. And you know the local government is majorly in charge of taxing the informal sector because they are closer to those businesses and the people. So that's one area I think needs to be handled. For the informal sector, sometimes they're giving different levies and they don't even know which is which. Why are we paying this? Why are we paying that? But when the guys who come, and you know it doesn't come in the civil manner as you would find the other tiers of government operating when it comes to collecting tax. It doesn't come in that civil manner. So it's either you pay or you leave the space. So. All
right, before I turn you to a guest on this show, Let's take the conversation to Dr. Titilayo Fowokon, who is joining us via Zoom. She's a chartered tax practitioner. We're going to look at tax incentives and investment promotion. Dr. Titilayo, glad you have joined us on Early Exchange. All right, let's go on a short break now so that we can reconnect with our guests. It's still Early Exchange, and it's going to get bigger and better. Stay with us. Factors being identified by our key persons is the issue of transportation. For you to have a sustainable city, you must have a deliberate attempt to have a master plan.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
All right, welcome back. We're looking at tax incentives and investment promotion in Nigeria, which is very critical to businesses, the survival of businesses, what the federal government needs to do in order to ensure that you attract more investment to Nigeria. And to help us shed more light on this, we're being joined by Dr. Titilayo Fowokon, who is a chartered tax practitioner. Dr. Titilayo, glad to have you join us on Early Exchange.
Good morning. How are you today?
Great. All right. Let's start with your assessment of the existing, tax incentives in Nigeria. Talk to us about how successful, if you agree they have been successful, how successful have they been looking at the existing tax incentives in Nigeria?
Okay, I would like to say that the existing tax incentives have been successful in the sense that we've seen some economic development by virtue of this incentive. For instance, we have the free zone that was created where we have businesses that are able to operate. And from there, there's exports and generation of foreign exchange. We have things around pioneer legislation, pioneer status incentive, which has enabled some companies to, some industries to grow and able to also create employment for the country. We also have things around, the pioneer is also for tax holidays. We have things around some tax credits, which, for instance, if you look at a road, there was a road infrastructure credit, which was initiated. Is actually a form of incentive or in form of a credit scheme, whereby when corporate organizations support the government in infrastructure, they can get this back in form of credits. And this has also helped in fixing some of our roads. And we've seen the economic impact. We have things around some sectors that have been encouraged by virtue of giving them tax holidays to be able to develop the created employment. They've also been able to add to the development of our economy. Even though we may not be there yet, we may not have achieved what we so desire to achieve. But I want to say that the era of tax incentive has actually helped us. It's just that we now need to start reviewing those tax incentives. Are they achieved their goal? Are they still necessary for the economy? Do we need to now rejig what we have before and repackage it? Do we have some sectors that we need to develop? And recently there's this the tech industry recently have gotten some recognition through the Nigerian Startup Act, and we've seen the rate in which technology has moved. We are now in the digital era, so the essence of tax incentive has helped even these young techpreneurs to be able to come up, and a lot is being done in that regard now. Prior to now, we've seen things around agriculture, some incentives given for loans given to agriculture. The interest on those loans were to some extent tax exempt, so the banks were encouraged to give loans for agriculture. We've seen things around the primary agriculture business. In fact, the Finance Act has also made primary agricultural production to be exempted from tax for a period of a maximum of 6 years. And these are areas that is developing, enabled us. But it's just that we need to now have a balance between the tax incentives we're given and the real impact on the economy, so that we are sure that we are really getting value for these incentives. I would say that tax incentives have done, but it's just that we need to also curb abuse of the incentives as much as possible. We need information around data, how much of these incentives have benefited us. It's also have a benefit in terms of foreign exchange, where you give incentive for operations in like the on-air free zone, like the Lagos free zone. The whole essence of this is for exports and for inflow of foreign exchange. These are all benefits of tax incentives. But the question we have to start asking ourselves is, how have these benefits improved our economy? I would say it has done its own part, but there might be issues around monitoring, issues around ensuring that the incentives are not just overstretched. You know, there must be a time frame in which you have an incentive and to check and say, has this incentive achieved its objective? Do we need to change what we have? Do we need to change the model? Which industries has this industry developed? If you look at things around the cement industry, the cement industry has developed such that incentives given under the pioneer legislation, sometimes in 2020, was removed. And that's because we now became net exporters of cement in the country. And this is part of the development that we've seen. So we have other areas too. We have incentives in relation to exports. This is all to encourage people to export goods out of the country, all because we want to look at bringing in foreign exchange into the country. But we're still not getting the benefit. We're still not feeling the benefit because of the situation we find ourselves today. Some other things are eroding this. So I think tax incentive have been useful to the country. It has helped us in the past, and I believe it can still help. It is still helping, but we just need to go back to the drawing board and see, do we need all the incentives? The current Finance Act 2023 has also tried to see how to reduce some of this incentive, but I think in the bit of doing that, it has to be holistic. It's not just to pick a few, but to look at all the incentives, look at the sectors that are benefiting, the sector that need to be benefited. How do we develop our domestic businesses, manufacturing businesses, and things like that? So there needs to be some reviews around incentives to see whether it's still serving its purpose or needs to be amended or realigned. I think those are the things that we need to do in terms of tax incentives. Thank you.
Incentives provided by the government to ensure that businesses are able to breathe, so to speak. There are some places around, or some locations around the world that are considered as tax haven, and incentives like this is the reason why investors flood to such destinations. But here we also have lots of incentive. But you mentioned that the gains have not actually been actualized. What are those factors that are watering down the gains of these incentives?
Now, the factors, number one of the factors is that do we have a proper monitoring of the benefits of these incentives? Can we say that all the incentives we given, let's take for instance, in the list of tax pioneer incentive under the tax holiday, we have different industries. We have technology, we have services, we have manufacturing, we have gas utilization, we have different aspects. Can we actually, as a country, look at each of this industry and say the incentive given to this industry has been able to add to our GDP by so percentage between this period and this period? And that comes to the issue of data. Do we have that data to assess the effectiveness of the incentive that we've given? In the absence of data, it is difficult for us to assess how effective they've been. And this is where we need to also, and we also have different government ministries that are managing some of this incentive. Though the incentive is talking about tax incentive, which is coming from the Ministry of Finance, but you find out that other sectors are, we have the Nigeria Investment Promotion Commission, who also needs to give an update as to what value has this incentive brought on the table. So there needs to be some synergy. There needs to be some assessment and to see how we've gotten, or what we've gotten, the value we've gotten from these incentives. And when we see the value, we can now know the ones that we can continue with. We can know the ones that has lived his life and needs to be repealed. Not that we just repeal it, because we can see that it has achieved the purpose for which it has been. And then in terms of also being able to monitor what is happening in each of this industry, to be sure that there is even no abuse of the incentive. And when you talk of abuse, it means that people that qualify to get this incentive are the ones getting it. And we are not getting leakages instead of getting development and economic improvement from the essence of these incentives. And these are critical to being sure that the incentives are achieving what they aim at achieving. We don't just want to have incentive. We want to have incentive that is adding value, because the incentive is translating to tax expenditure. Government is like opportunity cost. Government is giving out something to be able to give this incentive, and at the end of the day, this incentive should be able to tell us what improvements we have seen in our economy. Has it created more employment? Can we assess those who have been employed by virtue of this incentive? Has it made us to have food supply, massive food supply? So we also need to look at this. What specific value have been added to the country? And this has to do with the ministries that are in charge. They need to have oversight over this and be sure that whatever they are giving, they follow due process. It's not just because everybody comes, but there must be people that really qualify for it. It must not be something that is vague. It must be clear. and anyone that wants to review this should also be. So the leadership in terms of legislators should actually put this in ministries that are in charge to task to ensure that they are able to account for all these incentives and able to prove the value that have been added to the nation. And they should also be accountable to the citizens to tell the citizens that this is what we have been able to do as incentive. This is the value this incentive has added. This is how this incentive as a government is doing something for them, and they can also testify to the benefit they are getting from this. I think this needs to be done.
All right, let's look at the issue of abuse of tax incentives, which you earlier, make reference to it. Why do you think we keep having this kind of abuse, and then what can be done to ensure that this is being relegated?
Okay, I think the point of abuse is when there's no proper monitoring, because abuse of incentive comes when you are not qualified and you are able to navigate your way. Things around, I'm sorry to say, at times there's some collusion that comes, and then you get some approvals because you either know someone, or you are giving someone something, or you are able to just convince somebody to do something. So I think it is more of monitoring. It's more of having, as a Nigerian, I cherish Nigeria. So I would want to do things for the good of the country. If all of us have that in mind, then the issue of abuse will not come in. If there's a genuine reason. Abuse comes when there's no genuine reason, and the old reason is to evade tax. I don't want to pay tax, and that's why I want to enjoy all the incentive. Even when an industry has gotten to a growth stage, because we talk about startup, fine, incentive for startup, we enable them to grow, we enable them to be able to generate employment. Now, at the point when you have grown and you are ready, you should give back to the economy. And that's where the issue of abuse starts, because you've enjoyed it, you want to keep enjoying it, and you don't want to give back to the economy. Then it gets into abuse. You don't qualify, you do everything to get it, and at the end of the day, you pay less to the government, and government is not getting the objective and the result of giving that incentive. That's where the abuse comes from. And it's also out of, if we see Nigeria as our project, is our country, is our land, they'll be willing to do all that we do to contribute back. Having enjoyed those incentives, will be willing to contribute to the good and to development of the country. That we are talking about people leaving the country. It's because they cannot see, they can't see that future. They believe things are not getting better. But if people that have enjoyed these incentives, the companies that have enjoyed the incentives, are also able to plow back, create employment, add value to then we not get people to want to stay, and those are areas that we also need to look at.
Let's take a look at the pioneer status tax, for instance, where some companies are granted tax holiday. And you just talked about the startup. For the monitoring, shouldn't it be easy to monitor and know when a company is no longer within that status or no longer eligible for that? Because there is this registration document with the CAC. You know when the company was incorporated, and a company files its tax returns. Shouldn't it be very easy to just know, oh, these companies are eligible for this kind of incentive, and these other companies are not eligible for this incentive? Now, in determining the companies that are eligible for certain incentives, how difficult is it, or should it be?
It is not difficult. It is clear. The law has clearly specified those who are eligible, and to support that, there have been regulations, there have been some guidelines that have been provided. So it is clear to know those who are eligible. And it is also clear to know what we call date of production day. Because when you are submitting and you are applying for Pioneer, you would give so many documentation, including your proposals in terms of capital expenditure acquisition, in terms of employment that you plan for the next 5 years. because Pioneer is actually for the first 3 years and then extended for 2 years, except for, I think, primary agricultural production that now has, I think, 4 and 2, which is about 6. So it is clear to know when they qualify, when they do not qualify. The only thing is that Pioneer is given either by product or by industry. So it is possible for you to get Pioneer based on a product. And when that product has outlived its Pioneer period, you can actually invest. It's actually supposed to encourage investment. So these things are easy to track. It is a matter of being conscious of the responsibility that's been laid on the NIPC to monitor this, such that nobody is getting more than what they get. And I don't think it's difficult to do. I want to give it to NIPC that they've been trying their best. At least when people get Pioneer, you do 3 years, you have some reports you must submit. Even every year, you must file some things. You must show performance reports must be submitted after the first 3 years. Even when you want to come and renew, there's some requirement that I mean, even before you are given, there's some inspection that is done. It's just for this to be properly put into perspective when the reports are being done, when government is assessing how effective the incentive has been. And apart from you getting the Pioneer, they should be able to say, okay, for this particular Pioneer industry or product, how many companies have gotten it? What impact has that made? And that is where the issue of analyzing the data that we have. There are data. It's just to ensure that these data are properly aligned, analyzed, and to be able to address whether we've achieved the objective or not, and not just to be gathering the data. We can't be gathering data, knowing the companies, knowing the industry, but we must move to the next stage of analyzing this data and being sure that it has achieved what it's supposed to achieve. It shouldn't be a difficult thing if we do the right thing and follow the rule. There's a process, there's a law, there's a guideline, there are procedures to be followed. And once we follow this, they should not be difficult to track and prevent any abuse. You know, when we talk of abuse, I always ask myself a question: abuse in relation to what? If some things are done within the confines of the law, we can't say it's abuse. But if somebody does not qualify, and because corruption has allowed them to get what they do not qualify for, then the issue of abuse start coming in. But if people qualify and it can be demonstrated with appropriate documentation, I think that's not an abuse, and it should be assessed. And the next stage should be analyzing the impact that has made in the economy, in terms of employment, in terms of plowing back into the business, in terms of providing the object of that incentive, ensuring is achieved. Thank you.
Now let's look at investment promotion this time around. What do you think the federal government can do or put in place? What kind of mechanism do you think the federal government can put in place to attract both local and foreign investors?
Okay, in terms of investment promotion, I think the first is our economy. Our economy needs to be attractive, because as we are today, investors are looking at the political stability, they are looking at the economic stability of the nation, they are looking at the ease of doing business. I think it's critical for us to work. There's been some work done on ease of doing business, but I think we can improve on that. In fact, ease of doing business is the political situation, stability, the economic, in fact, foreign exchange has added to it now. The subsidy removal has even added to it. All this needs to be looked into, because if any investor wants to come in, they want to be assured that they'll be able to do their business well. Apart from even being able to repatriate their dividend or being able to repatriate their profits, they would have added some value, and it is the leftover, in quote, permit me to use that word, the leftover is what they will be taking back. They would have created employment. So in terms of, we must look at creating an environment whereby investors can come in, they can improve the life of our people, create employment, they can add value to our employable level, and they can also be sure that they'll be able to do their business without harassment. In fact, there's issue around multiplicity of taxes. You want to do a business, you pay the federal tax, which is in the law, you pay the state taxes, you come local government, and apart from local government, you have some other things that you also go through. So these are things that investors want to look at. They are not looking at tax alone. They are also looking at the stability of the economy. Are they sure of what will happen tomorrow? Or that they will just wake up and see things have changed? Is exchange rates, for instance, now, we don't know what the way exchange rate is going now. No investor will want to come, and the investors are even leaving. We've had a couple of companies that have left the country. And you know, the implication of that is that there will be unemployment because people they've employed will have to be left, thrown back to the unemployment food. So the stability of the economy is really, really important. Ease of doing business is important. Political stability is also important. They will not want to come and then there's extra scatter and they lose all their investment by virtue of opera or chaos or something. So I think these are critical, apart from tax, because they also look at the tax-friendly environment to be able to do their investment. So these are all put together in terms of taking an investment decision. It doesn't start from tax, because people always make that mistake that tax is the only thing. No, there are some non-tax factors that are looked at. Also, access to labor. They also look at that. They look at resources, other resources that they need for their business. The type of Nigeria is blessed. So you might look at the type of, for instance, now, if you look at fintech is another area. People are now coming to invest in fintech. We know a lot of things have happened, and creating that enabling environment for them to thrive will also encourage investment. Before we even start talking about foreign direct investment, even investment by the Nigerians, we have a situation whereby there are so many bottlenecks. Removing those bureaucratic bottlenecks in being able to run the business is also an advantage. It's also something that will attract investment into any country or any environment. Thank you.
Some other factors that are disincentives to investors. It's not just about tax. Now let's look at infrastructure deficits. To what extent will industrial hubs help in attracting and keeping investors when we have industrial hubs?
Now, it will go a long way because, you know, if you look at infrastructure, it's also important for investment. For instance, for those who are into consumer goods, the roads, if the roads are bad, how do they move from their production to the consumer? The cost of doing business would be affected. So if there are industrial hubs that can come together and be able to have a voice, but one thing is for them to have a voice, another thing is for the government to be ready to listen to them. They know how what they are going through. They know how best things can be done to help them to fit into the purpose. So the industrial, for instance, let's look at the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. They come together and they talk about the common effects that is affecting manufacturers. And one of it is exchange rate because of importation of their raw materials. But the key thing is, even after saying this, does the government really listen to them? Does the government see them as a major partner in making sure that there are good infrastructure development? Things around power is also critical. Things around things around utility is critical. So if there's no power, the roads are bad, then we have two major aspects that are going to affect them. Now there's no constant supply of power. You're using maybe diesel. Now diesel has gone up, so the cost of doing business has also gone up. But with the industrial hub, they're able to have a common purpose, and they're able to channel their costs. They're able to also to give support to see how they can provide. For instance, look at the road infrastructure credit. The road infrastructure credit is a means to provide infrastructure, especially road networks. And quite a number of roads have been done through this by the combination of the different companies that have come together are now durable. People can now move the goods to the consumers. People that are not even businesses are also enjoying the roads. The Obajana Kaba road is being enjoyed. We have the Woroshoki road that's just been done, and we have things that have been done under these different up. And it's because some people have come together and say, oh, this is something we can do, and they all came together and say, let's see how we can support government in this infrastructure and take it in form of tax credits. Because, you know, if you look at time value of money, you may not say that it is valuable, but because it is going to help other sectors, they have seen it as a means of, let's invest in this infrastructure under that common goal, and then let's see how we help the economy to grow by virtue of infrastructure development. We are now looking at area of power. because if you have power, you have good roads, that's access to markets. The artisans, they'll be able to work. You can develop the non-informal sector. The informal sector is a larger part of our economy, and they rely more on power. So these are, once we have these industrial hubs, and they're able to look at how best can we support government, and also government gives them some relief in terms of whatever support they give, which is what the road infrastructure tax credit is able to do. So we can have this, it will also help to drive this. But it also comes from government's political will to support these hubs and listen to them, because they know more about where the shoe is pinching them, and they'll be able to provide solutions to how best to help them, so they can also contribute their quota to the growth of the economy. Thank you.
Now, let's take a shift to look at the issue of tax compliance. Now, in spite of the incentives by government, you still discover that the level of compliance is still low. What can be done to change the narrative?
I've always said, when it comes to compliance, I always encourage people to voluntarily comply. But it comes from government's accountability and responsibility. And you know, there's always a social contract. Though I believe that if there's a law, you comply with the law. But at the same time, there's an expectation that when I do my part, government will do its part. And that is where the issue comes from. A lot of times, even those who are voluntarily complying are being under the pressure of paying more. They get a lot, and those who are not complying seems to feel they can. And so until when there's a definite action on non-compliance, and not on those who are complying, and maybe by virtue of one small they probably miss one deadline or something, and they get beaten. There should be some form of encouragement for those who are voluntarily complying, and make them as an example for others, and encouragement of others. Let people see what the tax payment is doing. Let them see what their taxes are doing. Let it not be that they that pay, they are the ones that are being made to pay more, and they are not paying and are happy that they are not paying, and nothing is happening. If there's going to be anything to be done to non-compliance, it should be genuine non-compliance cases, and every other person should be made to see the effort made by government to deter non-compliance. I think this will help. And also, like I also say, ease of paying taxes. I want to give it to the tax authorities. They are making it easy. You now pay on platforms. You don't have to move from one place to the other before you can pay your taxes. You can pay from the confines of your room. Fine, it is good. That is really very good. And I believe that this is the right way to go. But at the same time, there must be some name and shame when non-compliance comes up. And the name and shame must have to be it must be defendable. It must be clear. And then there must be proper interpretation of the laws. At times, when the drive for tax collection is higher than looking at the business exigencies, it becomes a problem. So I think that it would be good for there to be that social contract or compliance with the social contract between the citizens and government. Government needs to be accountable. They need to be transparent. They need to be sincere, so that the citizens will know that government is not just collecting, they are using it for something, and then that will make people to voluntarily want to add to the pot of the tax collection of the country. I think it's very necessary. Don't punish those who are doing well. Don't tax people to poverty. Please let the poor breathe. Let the businesses breathe, and let them be able to do business, contribute to the economy, create employment, and still be able to pay their own share of tax to the government. That's what I would say. An individual
what percentage
yeah.
is ideal? Should it vary according to sector, industry? We know that the corporate income tax is put at 30% currently in Nigeria. Do you think it should be standard, or it should vary so that some industries, some sectors are not overtaxed? And is it possible for those who are complying willingly to have a rebate as some encouragement and serve as an incentive for others to follow suit?
In terms of the tax rates, I think the government has tried to do some graduated rates for small, medium, for the small 0%, no tax, so that can encourage them, which I think is a good one. For the medium, 20% companies, and for the large, 30%. I think that graduation of rates is a welcome development, though it can also be looked into. I know the national tax policy also looked at reducing the corporate income tax rate so that there can be more people to be encouraged in terms of compliance. I want to believe that the tax policy reform committee are also going to work on this. They're going to look into this and be sure that they consider some of this. Then in terms of, I think you talk in terms of incentives for those who are complying. I think there used to be a 1% self-assessment bonus, which I think is still there for those who comply. That's an encouragement, but you know, the conditions for that is also not that easy. You must pay within a particular time. What if you have cash flow? So there must be something that is flexible. When I mean flexible, not open to different interpretation, but it's clear, it's easy to administer. Let me use that way. So it's something that when you look at it, for instance, if you're complying and you have a problem, then it shouldn't now be seen as a default. Once you communicate that, there should be some relief for you. Then in terms of, I know there'll be times that when individuals comply, they have like a forum whereby such individuals are actually brought out to the limelight that this person has contributed to the state purse, they've done this, they've complied, as an example for others. And they are more like, not a rebate anyway, because we won't be saying, but government is talking about getting more money, and you're saying reducing it. But I'm saying those people are given recognition and the contribution they've made. So other people are encouraged by what they've done. Now, but what they contribute, government should use it for the better life of everybody. And so can have more people say, yes, since I can see what government is using, I also want to contribute to the life of others. And this has to do with you being a citizen, seeing yourself as a proper citizen of the country and contributing your quota. So I think it's good to encourage those who contribute well. And I think it's also the best to punish those who are not doing the right thing so that this can balance. But the political will to do both is also what needs to be considered.
Right, we must wrap up at this point. Dr. Titilayo Fowoko, we want to appreciate you for your brilliant submissions and for spending time with us on Early Extinct this morning.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, we're due for another break. When we return, we'll have more discussion related to tax policy in Nigeria. Stay with us.
I'm okay.
My name is Raymond Bola Brown.
My name is Larry, and I play Afro reggae music.
Hi, my name is Fred Amata, and you're on to Souq News.
If you are watching this channel for the first time, make sure you continue to watch it, because this is Souq News.
Shout out to Souq News. Actually, I don't know. I really enjoyed the little moment I spent with you, and I think with more of this.
Souq News. Here's the Souq News, who had the courage to transcend a locked off camera and actually have a conversation with a human being. It's a pleasure, Souq News. Thank you very much.
If you want to advertise your product, just come here and let us help you to get to places. Yeah, you can't do it alone, no. You need this channel to do it for you.
So I've codified the relationship between transformation and its component forces, being vision, team, time, resources, and resolve, in what I call the Austin's 5 forces model for transformation. Transformation depends on force number 1, vision. A great vision is imperative to a successful transformation journey. A great vision galvanizes the team and provides clarity. So if we take an example of Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore, he was the one that turned Singapore, a third world country, into a sprawling metropolis that we see today. And he's saying that even the impossible can happen, encapsulate the strength of vision. Clear vision is a rallying point, and that brings us to the second force of transformation, which is the team. Successful transformation depends on a team that is both strong in attitude as well as in aptitude. The team must act with pace and agility, and the team must display a sense of resourcefulness. The team must know the why of the vision, not just the what and the how. And if you look at an example of the Apollo program by NASA in the United States of America and the trip to the moon, there were about 400,000 people working on that project. But what typifies the team was the 3 people, Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Buzz Aldrin, and the resourcefulness and the agility that they brought to the project. That's what we describe as a winning team. The third force of transformation is time. The whole effort of the Apollo project would have been futile if the Soviet Union had gotten to the moon before the Apollo project could make it. So time is one of the critical constraints in terms of the transformation project, but timeliness as well, because we must be sure that the ideas' time has come. There were many ideas that fell short at launch because it was just not the time for it. Netflix has proved the point. Amazon has proved the point. The fourth force in the transformation journey will be resources. And whilst resources are not infinite, we have to provide resources in the right measure to prosecute the vision. So the Apollo project was achieved by spending over 25.4 billion in those days money, which is an equivalent of about 152 billion of today's money. And whilst that is quite humongous, it matches the size and ambition of the vision. And whilst resources are not infinite, the team has to complement resources with resourcefulness, doing more with less. And the last force probably the most important, is resolve. Resolve is the will to win. Resolve it is that made Thomas Edison discover the electric light bulb after 6,000 failed attempts. And it is resolve that made an obscure team like Leicester City in the English Premiership League win the 215th, 216th league title, despite the fact that they were recently promoted from the division below. The tenacity to win, the will not to give up, to go all the way. So, ladies and gentlemen, in this life going forward, in your transformation journey, see how you stack up against these 5 forces.
Amamoke.
My name is Raymond Bola Brown.
My name is Larry, and I play Afro reggae music.
Hi, my name is Fred Amata, and you are on to Souq News.
If you are watching this channel for the first time, make sure you continue to watch it because this is Souq News.
Shout out to Souq News. Actually, I don't know. I really enjoyed the little moment I spent with you, and I think with more of this.
Souq News. Here's the Souq News who had the courage to transcend a locked-off camera and actually have a conversation with a human being. It's a pleasure, Souq News. Thank you very much.
If you want to advertise your product, just come here and let us help you to get to places. Yeah, you can't do it alone. No, you need this channel to do it for you.
No, you don't need it for all.
One of the factors being identified by our key persons is the issue of transportation. For you to have a sustainable city, you must have a deliberate attempt to have a master plan.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Very soon, Early Exchange was to talking taxation today. Yes, we're looking at the various tax reforms and initiatives that Nigeria has or has from time to time come up with to ensure revenue generation, to reduce cases of tax evasion, and also to ensure that there is compliance. How much has this worked out is what we'll be looking at today. But before we bring in our guest, who's a legal practitioner, to speak to us about tax reforms in Nigeria, I still have one Nigerian here who pays his tax because he doesn't have an option about it. As the money is coming, his tax is already deducted, and then he's giving the rest to hold. But if he wasn't that kind of a situation, I'm still sure that Femi would do what he's obligated to do as a Nigerian.
You know, you can be rest assured that I'll always be patriotic. I'm proud of Nigeria, and I'll always do my part to ensure that there's growth and development. You must understand that it is important to pay taxes because as a citizen, it's part of what you need to do to ensure that your country develop. You know, where the challenge is, there's this huge distrust between the citizens and the government. Or some of the citizens who don't pay because they feel that the ones they've paid or the money being paid for taxes are not well utilized. And that's why there's a need for transparency, you know, when it comes to the legal framework guiding tax collection in Nigeria. You know, I was listening to Taiwo Oyedele, the chairman of the Presidential Reforms Committee on Tax in Nigeria. He was trying to say that when you look at the issue of multiple taxation, you know, double taxation, if you look at, in fact, the taxes that are being paid in Nigeria, the numbers are just there that you can't even tell how many taxes are supposed to be paid. And you have a situation where they are not even harmonized, and I'm happy they are looking at that now. If you look at the ratio of tax collection to GDP in Nigeria, it is relatively low compared to other parts of the world. It's still about 10.8%. And now the Tax Reform Committee, they are targeting 18% now for the next 3 years to see how they can improve on that. And so I'm hopeful that with these arrangements, let's see that if the tax reforms in Nigeria will get better.
Achieve that.
Yeah.
All right, we know that Ebenezer Oloronju is ready to speak to us this morning about tax reform. Good morning.
Yes, good morning.
You must have heard Femi talk about the plan to increase the tax to GDP ratio to about 18%. Now, looking at the tax reforms that we have in Nigeria, which primarily are aimed at generating revenue and reduce cases of tax evasion, does it seem like this would work at getting that there? Things we need to tweak.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for this privilege to speak to you on this subject. And it's a very wonderful time in the annals of our tax expense that this is coming up, especially the fact that we're trying to move from an oil-based revenue, oil-based economy, to a tax-driven economy. And to that end, we have seen in the present administration that the political will is there to upscale tax generation generally. And the possibility of the tax to GDP ratio is very possible with the foot that this present administration has put forward in this light, and then with the committee of stellar faculty that has been put together, led by Taiwo Oyedele, I see that becoming a reality.
Let's have your take on the existing tax laws. There are several of them, and what are the kind of reforms you think will be necessary to ensure that the legal framework guiding tax collection in Nigeria is better?
Okay, we're talking about the legal framework, the tax administration generally in Nigeria as it is. There are a number of them, and I'm sure that the speakers before me have highlighted several. We have the Personal Income Tax Act, we have the Value Added Tax Act, we have the Petroleum Profits Act, we have the FIRS Act, that's the enabling law that empowers the FIRS to collect taxes and administer taxes and all of that. We have all of those, and if I were to advise, I think we need to come to a point where we harmonize our tax laws. Reason being that there's a lot of proliferation of tax laws that has caused confusion, as it were, amongst even the taxpayers, so that they don't know what tax to pay, what rate to pay, and the whole confusion is giving room for tax evasion and tax avoidance. Even though in law, we say something about the fact that ignorance of the law is not an excuse, but because there is less awareness about what taxes you ought to pay as a business person or as an individual, even the ones who are willing to make payments for themselves, not paying.
But looking at the various tax reforms that we have and compliance, one thing that's often been said is willingly complying, the citizens complying willingly. You know, with anything that has to do with money, it's hard for people to willingly comply. Now, in other climes, if it was left to the citizens to comply willingly with tax payment, I'm very sure a lot of persons would evade tax. They would not pay. Penalties when people do not comply. How do we work around that without even making it so very difficult, or maybe the penalty becomes outrageous? How do we ensure compliance?
You see, the issue has to do with our peculiarity in this climate, where we just feel, I talked about largely it's because of this distrust between the government and the citizen, where they just believe that the ones that have been collected, the taxes or the revenue, the essence of taxation is to raise money, to get revenue for government. So there's this perception that, okay, the revenue, how much are you spending it, That's why I said there's a need for transparency. But what can also be done now to attract more people into that net, or to encourage more people to pay taxes, is to see that this money are well utilized. And then there's need for orientation, to orientate people. And also there's a need to also make example of people, because to deter others who feel they are above the law, they don't need to pay. For instance, if you still have a situation where the rich people get away with tax evasion, the VIPs, get away with it. So why do you think the poor man will not want to do that? This time around, we won't have to use the word "let the poor breathe." It's not applicable here, because everybody will have to pay taxes. But really, if you can make an example of the big people, the rich, the VIP, and the poor man can see that, yes, you've made an example of such people, it will deter them from not paying taxes. So these are things that need to be put in place. Then there's also proper, monitoring. You have a lot of people who are not paying taxes, who are not in the tax lane, especially those in the informal sector. For those who are in the formal sector, there are structures that could factor in their payment. Most important, people like people in the civil service. Most of these taxes, like personal income taxes, VAT, they are deducted from the source, so it's easier. But for the informal sector, there's a need to put in place proper framework and mechanism to ensure that those who have not been targeted are targeted. There are a lot of businesses who are registered now, but they've not been remitting taxes. Perhaps because of the poor business environment, they've not been making gains. They give you the impression that, yes, they've not been making gains, you understand? Even in the real sense, if they've been making small gains, but they give the impression because they feel, to part with that kind of money is not that easy. But there's a need for orientation for people to understand that it's obligatory as a citizen to pay taxes. Alante Ebenezer Oloronju is back with us. Glad to have you join us once again, Ebenezer. Once again, Ebenezer. Once again, Ebenezer.
So it's also a rainy day, so I think it's the rain is cross country.
So please go ahead with your thoughts.
I was saying that the tax reforms is coming at a very good time, in the sense that what we need at a time like this is a codification of our laws and harmonization of our laws, so that Nigerian can relate with the tax they're supposed to pay. We have a situation where our laws are so disjointed and not codified in a manner that taxpayers can relate with them. They are so scattered, and even when we want to do the amendment to our laws, if you take a look at the Finance Act, for instance, we have the Finance Act 2023, we have the Finance Act 2022, we have the Finance Act 2021, I think. When you look at the amendments that are being made, for instance, you want to amend a provision of the Finance Act 2021 in 2022, you see something like this act now amends section 21 of the Finance Act to include the word this. Some of these changes makes our laws disjointed. So my proposition is this: for us to really get our tax jurisprudence right and develop our tax reforms, tax administration properly, we must come to terms with codifying our laws in such a way and manner that it will be easy for everyone to access and understand. The language of the laws must be made very simple also. That's just my thought on that.
During the informal sector, what approach would the government need to employ, or what reform would need to be made to ensure that the informal sector is captured and there are also no tax leakages? Because you look at the way tax is collected in the informal sector, it's done through third party and sometimes almost fourth party being involved. And so there are so many areas for leakages to happen. How do we address that?
Okay, thank you very much. Now, that has been a major concern. And when you look at some tax laws, particularly, I think I can really it's legal subcontractor who is usually called contractors. Now, the arrangement of consultants, sorry, the arrangement of consultants, if I understand this, the government come into an arrangement with someone they call consultant for certain types of taxes, and then remit a certain amount, and whatever is generated is not the business of the government once the consultant comes with the benchmark they say they should bring. Now, that in itself is bad for our tax development. Every Nigerian everybody who pays money, whether taxes, whether levies, whether dues, wants to see value for the money they have paid. We must come to a point where we must do away with them, with this concept that tax is compulsory and you cannot ask what the tax is used for. That in itself is the reason why most persons, particularly the people in the informal sector, will not pay taxes until you force them. This informal sector goes out, generate their own electricity, fix their own roads, generate businesses for themselves, make money under the sun and in the rain, and you just come without giving them, because we say there's no element of quid pro quo in taxation. You just come and you think that people will just part with their hard-earned money. It doesn't work that way anyway. So we must come to terms with linking tax to service. And when I say linking tax to service, if you must address the payment of taxes by the informal sector, you must come to tax to service such that the taxes that are being collected from these informal sector people are channeled into things that will directly impact on them and their businesses. That way, you will encourage and you will see a surge, an upsurge in the payment of taxes from the informal sector. So that's going to be my own proposition to them, to the tax authorities, if they really want to capture the tax, the informal sector.
Right, let's look at the issues around value-added tax. I'm happy you're a legal practitioner. And in reference to the court case between the federal government and the Rivers State government, and at a point to the Lagos State government, where there was this clash of interest when it comes to the collection of value-added tax. I would like to have your take on that, and what are the lessons from these court cases?
You know, just like you said, I am a legal practitioner. This matter is before the courts, and there's something we say, when the matter is sub judice, it is sub judice, nobody comment on it till the courts come to a decisive decision on it. So at the risk of running foul of the law, please let me not comment on it, because the decision has not yet been handed down to the best of my knowledge. So please let me not delve into that because of my position as a legal practitioner. However, the lesson in it is this: taxation is purely law. And it is good that we have gone to the courts to get a decisive decision on who should collect what tax, particularly the VAT. We wait for the decision of the Supreme Court, because I understand that it's before the learned justices of the Supreme Court, and then we are waiting for the decision to be handed down. I'm not sure it has been handed down yet, but please, I beg to be properly guided. However, our tax jurisprudence is being developed by that decision, because that will definitely, whatever decision the learned justice of the Supreme Court comes down with, will definitely change the jurisprudence, particularly as it affects value-added tax section. Because some persons are feeling like they are being shortchanged. Some persons are feeling like they contribute so much, but they get very little. Some persons are feeling like, okay, you frustrate this tax, you want to benefit from the process of the tax. So please, let's wait for the decision of the Supreme Court on that. Then we can now make comment on it. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's look at the impact of tax reforms in Nigeria on the ease of doing business and investment climate.
Okay,
the tax
now when you talk about tax reforms, okay. Sorry.
Okay, my question is this: how has the reforms that we have in Nigeria, tax reforms, impacted the ease of doing business and investment climate in Nigeria, are there some adjustments that can be made?
Okay. Now, talking about tax reforms, okay? Tax reforms refers to a method of changing the way taxes are collected and managed by the government. That's just what, simply said, that's what tax reforms are. And looking at what we have presently in Nigeria, I think we have done well in terms of our tax reforms, and it has impacted positively on tax collection and investment. Now, the FIRS have gone a notch higher by the introduction of the Tax Pro Max, which makes the filing of tax returns very easy. You can do it from the cost that comes with filing of your tax returns and the stress that comes with filling very lengthy forms have been reduced. Now, digitalization of tax collection also has reduced the incidence of corruption. Now, I'm using the word corruption advisedly in the sense that sometimes you want to file your tax returns, and before you get audience, you need to give a number of kickbacks before you get your files moved. You have to settle this person, settle that person to move forward because you want to beat the penalty. Now, all of those ones have been cut out. So the investor who wants to come into Nigeria knows that when I need to file my taxes, I can sit in the comfort of my room, assess myself to tax, which is the first responsibility of every business owner, self-assessment to tax, and make the payment. If there is any issues, you'll be communicated electronically. So that has in itself increased tax compliance in Nigeria. Then secondly, we also have a situation where with the present administration now, the ease of business is so fantastic with the tax reforms we are having. For instance, very recently by an executive order, the president has suspended VAT on diesel. So you discover that the cost of running your organization on electricity, especially when you are self-powering yourself, has reduced. For those who want to invest in CNG, VAT and import duties have already been taken off CNG kits. This is to encourage investments. So to my mind, we are doing well in terms of our tax reforms. There is a room to do better, but we are not doing badly at all. And I see that culminating in prosperity for the nation going forward.
I would like you to guide us on the provision of the law when it comes to the issue of double or multiple taxation. What's the position of the law, and then how can a business owner take advantage of that provision to seek justice when it comes to the issue of double or multiple taxation?
Okay. Double taxation and multiple taxation are two different concepts in law. Now, double taxation is you paying the same tax on the same item. Now, take for instance, and at some point, the Lagos state government introduced sales tax, and there is also VAT, which is at that, in the strict sense of it, as double taxation. Okay, taxation. Another example of double taxation is when we are agitating now that each state their own VAT. All right. Sorry, excuse me, please. Just a minute, please.
Let's take this discussion. All right. You see, the issue of double taxation has been of concern over the years. You have a situation where, like what is trying to explain, you pay for a particular thing, you know, not just once but twice. In fact, at some instances, you pay to different agencies. And one of the things identified by Taiwo Oyedele, you know, when he came on board was the issue of double taxation and the fact that the laws guiding our taxes are not being harmonized. You have different laws, like he alluded to, whereby even as a legal practitioner, you need to sit down and read and do a lot of research for you to be able to harmonize this law. These are part of the things that committee, you know, is working on to ensure that the laws guiding tax collection in Nigeria, you know, are being harmonized so that it brings transparency and accountability. So it's also of concern to business owners because you have a situation where you're paying more for something and you are not enjoying the services, which is why most people, you know, evade tax, even though it's not ideal. But these are things that need to be plugged and ensure that they are tackled to ensure people who are willing to pay tax and to encourage them in this obligation, because as a citizen we must understand we need to do our part for the government to be able to do their part. It's necessary.
Yes, and in the government doing its part, you know, I asked earlier about the impact of the tax reforms on the ease of doing business. Now, those are some of the areas that need to be addressed. Double taxation, for instance, you pay one kind of, or the same kind of tax to different tiers of government. It could be to the federal and then to the state, but it's the same thing mainly that you're paying from one business. And then there's also multiple taxation. You're paying tax in different areas. By the time the business puts together all that goes out in the form of tax, they find one reason or the other to want to evade tax. Not as if it's justifiable, but given economic situation and all other things that they need to attend to financially, some companies may find the need to want to evade tax. But harmonizing it will make it easier for businesses to comply with tax payment, and it will also improve the business environment, because while government wants to generate revenue, there's a need to have a balance, to create a balance in achieving a business-friendly environment, because you do not want to stifle the businesses. If you stifle them, it then means the tax you're asking that they pay, that business will not be there to provide it. So it is about expanding the net rather than increasing the taxes, which sometimes the double taxation and the multiple taxation create different layers, and it just amounts to an increased tax payment.
In fact, I would love to seek Benize's opinion, because I would love a situation where a business owner would test the law, especially on this issue of double taxation.
All right.
Benize, glad to have you join us once again.
So sorry for that glitch. Is some office miscommunication. So sorry about that.
No problem. So you wanted to conclude your thought on the issue of double taxation, the provision of the law. Like I said, I would love a business owner to test the law, and I want you to guide that business owner.
Okay, so talking about double taxation, like I said, double taxation has been declared illegal severally. That is what came up when the courts made it emphatic that sales tax is not known to our laws and it is null and void and should not be collected. That has been tested. I mean, the hotel management, the Hotel Association of Lagos State, I think, have tested that, and the court have agreed with them. So it is there's no gainsaying the fact that double taxation is illegal, and the courts always frown at it. Now, the issue of taxation itself is a situation where you have a business owner pay years of taxes, and that's why we are now advocating and agitating for the harmonization of our taxes. For a business owner who feels he's being double taxed on an item, there are lawyers who are learned in the issue of taxation. Approach one, pay the necessary consultation fees, give your brief, and I'm sure we will do justice to it. We are on the side of protecting the rights of citizens. and we will stop at nothing to ensure that that is done. We want to develop our tax jurisprudence, and that is why the courts are there to help us ensure that the tax jurisprudence is developed on a daily basis. And a good example of that is what you see with the value-added tax that I told you is already before the courts. The Sales Tax Act have been brought down because it was seen as a form of double taxation alongside VAT. There were some other taxes that were state governments that is cut down because it conflicts with certain some income taxes, yes, have been brought down because it conflicts with the personal income tax. So I say that there and they will do justice. So we are readily available. Bring your brief. We advise you accordingly. We approach the court where we feel that your rights are being infringed or you are being doubly taxed. And I'm sure we get an informed decision of the court on the way to go. Thank you very much.
All right, let's talk about taxing Nigeria into prosperity. You have a colloquium upcoming 25th of October in Abuja, and it's going to center on the Finance Act and tax policies. Can you talk to us more about that?
Okay, thank you very much. Now, this colloquium has come to stay, and it was born out of the desire to develop our tax jurisprudence, like I told you. This will be the 6th edition in the series that we have done. We started in 2018, and it started as Tax Matters Seminar. We have been able to navigate certain issues around our tax jurisprudence. We have navigated and advised states on what to do to upscale their taxation, their tax generation and revenue generation as a whole. Some of the things, some of the loopholes they need to block to seal up the leakages in taxes. And this year, looking at the body language of the present administration, we have seen the political will to upscale tax revenue generation without unnecessarily burdening the businesses that are available. So this colloquium has come at a time like this to look at practical steps that we can take as a nation to prosper via taxation without, like they say, tightening our belt unnecessarily. One of the things that we want to focus on is the taxation of the sports industry. And we have a very wonderful expert in sports law who is going to take that session. There is a lot of revenue generated in the sports space that, if properly harnessed and the proper legal framework is put in place for the taxation of that space, we don't need to increase our tax rates like has been advocated before by my previous speakers and even by you guys in the hall, in the studio there. We just want to widen our tax nets. And if you look at the sports space, there are enormous and humongous opportunity to generate revenue via taxation that the government is looking away from. So that's one of the things we're going to look at in this particular colloquium.
All right, can you talk to us about the mode of participation? Is it open to virtual participation, or you have to be in Abuja physically to be a part of this? And where is it holding?
Oh, it's open to everyone to participate. We are working on having it virtually streamed on YouTube, on Facebook, and we are working on that very time to send out the link to participate and to get on.
Very much, Ebenezer Olorunju, for your time with us today on Early Exchange. Be sure that we will give you more information as to how you can be part of this colloquium. I am very sure that business owners and even state governments and local governments, other tiers of government ministries want to be part of this colloquium to know how they can improve the tax opportunities that they have in their states, in the local government, and in their sectors, and also how they can benefit as businesses. That's been the show today. Thank you very much for your time with us. An exchange will come your way again tomorrow at 7 a.m. West African time. Do not forget that Business Insight comes up on Souq News at 10 a.m. I am Blessing Aichi from Femi.
Today is World Food Day, so I'm going to leave you with this word: make food your medicine, so that medicine will not be your food. I'm Femi Ayodele. Bye for now.